Hi everybody, I haven't done a video addressing my stance on transphobia and gender inequality, so let's get to it. Firstly, I am not a part of the trans community. I do not speak for them or anyone else. I speak only for myself. I think transphobia is a social disease that infects the heart and mind. People may feel afraid and threatened that their old systems of gender roles are falling apart because there are people that don't want to subscribe to the broken misogynistic social model that benefits some but not all, making the world less safe for non-believers. To clarify my stance, I do not care what gender people are. I do not care what genitals that they have. I respect the names and pronouns that people want to be called. It's not difficult to respect trans people. It's not difficult to respect your fellow human beings. We are living in a society that is going through a very hard transition into a more gender-equal society because there is a threshold of people that no longer subscribe to the gender norms of the past. Let's look at our past as a society for some context on this topic. Living in a toxic male-dominated society where both men and women had their specific roles to play, the consequence of not subscribing to those roles was violence or rejection from social circles, rejection from a job, rejection from family, friends. Women and men could be canceled from society for not following the social rules for gender. These social rules were no doubt agreed upon by those who benefited the most from it. People who felt threatened when others deviated from the status quo. Now let's look at our present model of gender propriety. Many people still live in a reality where toxic misogyny and male domination is acceptable, but a shift is happening where many men and women are no longer subscribing to that model, and they are making very clear boundaries and moving away from the circles of misogyny and gender inequality. And misogynistic and transphobic people are starting to see friends and family, co-workers, and their community start to distance themselves from them because they don't feel safe around them anymore. We are finally seeing people standing up for themselves and saying no to the oppressor. We are witnessing scores of people collectively agreeing that all humans are equal, all humans deserve to be treated with respect, and all deserve to feel safe. But that challenges the toxic masculine energy, which these days falls short of meeting society's needs for feeling loved, appreciated, safe, and respected. Both men and women are refusing to live in a world that tells them who they should be, how they should act, who they can love, and what they should wear based on their sex organs. People that want to hold on to this concept of traditional gender roles are frustrated that others don't want to conform to their restrictive ideology. Their entire identity and existence is based on this system where they could look at a person and know their reproductive organs. It really hurts people's feelings when they can't look at a person and know what genitals that they have. I want to say that it's so creepy that people care so much, but then I get a picture of a bunch of insecure men that start hitting on a woman, but oh no, it's a trans woman and that's not okay. So they feel bamboozled because they have all these unsolicited expectations about gender and that's somehow the other person's fault. And because men like that are emotionally immature, they don't know how to just let it go and move on. Or in the case of J.K. Rowling, where she thinks that trans women are trying to make a mockery out of biological women, which they clearly aren't. If anything, being a man sucks so much that even men don't want to be men. Okay, dumb argument, but my point is that there's no reason to be upset about this. Trans people aren't trans people because of you and your life. They're not doing it for you. And I think it's so selfish when transphobic people just turn it into them and make themselves a victim when clearly they're the ones being the bullies. It's transphobic people who are making the world less safe for trans people. They're the oppressors, they're the bullies. They're not the victims as much as they want to be to just avoid all accountability. Can someone's own sense of self-worth be so impacted by what other people do to their bodies? As a biological cis woman, I do not feel threatened by trans women at all. I don't feel smaller, less capable, or less of a woman because of what other people choose to do to their bodies, who others choose to identify as. They're not making a mockery out of me, they're not making a mockery out of anyone. This is who they are, they feel comfortable with this identity, what's the big deal? Treat them with respect just like any other person. I think it's a sign of a really healthy emotional state of being when you're comfortable with who you are and not influenced by how other people perceive you. Nor shall you be moved by how everyone else wants to be perceived. You respect yourself and you respect others. Being comfortable with yourself is not easy in a society that expects you to conform to a certain social model, but if we want to make the world a safer, more peaceful place, we have to live a more emotionally intelligent and peaceful life. We have to stand up for ourselves and embody the equality that our society desperately needs. It's not hard to be respectful and call people by the pronouns they want to be called by. Out of respect, we call people by the names that they introduce us by. So what's the difference? When you refuse to respect people's pronouns, you are telling them and the world that you do not respect people's identity, but yet you want your pronouns and your identity to be respected. How is that fair? By refusing to give basic respect to the trans community, you make yourself a place where they can't feel safe, which adds to the already unsafe world that they have to live in. Transphobic people might be feeling unsafe because their social beliefs are becoming obsolete in the changing social sphere, and they're having trouble accepting and adapting to these changes. They cling to the past and resist the transition to a more peaceful future. But we really do have to leave the past in the past and stop resorting to violence every time the old system is challenged. Do you really think that we can make the world a safer place by supporting systems, policies, and social behaviors that make less places for trans people to feel safe? Because let's remember that trans people face bullying, abuse, and other forms of physical violence. They face suicidal thoughts from within because of the violence from society. But what do transphobic people have to deal with? A bruised ego? That's clearly not fair. Trans people deserve to feel safe, safe from being bullied, safe from violence, safe from prejudice. Transphobic people are not the victim here. They are the oppressor. Alright, let's talk about bathrooms and gender. A common transphobic argument insinuates that bathrooms will be less safe because predators will pretend to be a certain gender only to gain access to a different bathroom to assault their victims. This insinuates that all trans people are predators and that single-sex bathrooms somehow magically protect against predators masquerading as a specific gender. Firstly, predators come in many forms, and it disrespects trans people by assuming the trans community is responsible for all predatory circumstances. You guys, a plaque on the door is not going to stop predators. Sexual abuse happens all the time, in plain sight, in front of people, at festivals, at the grocery store, on the street. You are not making a positive difference by forcing people to go into a space they feel unsafe and potentially set them up for sexual assault. Research shows that assaults are less likely to happen in public bathrooms and more likely to happen in a setting familiar to the victim, like their home. Most sexual assaults happen from the people the victim knows, and unfortunately, children are not exempt from these numbers. This includes trans children. If you want to make public restrooms more safe for everybody, stop excluding those who feel safer in one bathroom over the other. Trans people are at a higher risk of sexual assaults when they are forced to go into bathrooms or locker rooms that is not consistent with their gender identity. Both trans and non-trans people deserve to feel safe. Neither trans people nor non-trans people want to be the victim of sexual assault, so let's make the world safer for everyone. Okay, let's talk about weird extremes. So the gender identity conversation is about human beings identifying as either male or female or non-binary. But some transphobic people are trying to go to the extreme and say that people are trying to identify as an inanimate object or an animal. And this is disrespectful and ignorant because no one is seriously making those claims, and using those comparisons is dehumanizing and belittles a relevant humanitarian social movement that just wants to see equality of genders. There's something called othering, aka otherizing, which is like saying they're not like us. You know, stereotyping, xenophobia, racism, prejudice, which can all lead to discrimination and abuse and bullying. How do you think transphobic people would feel if they were being othered? We live in such a messed up society that humans are treating each other in such terrible ways. What's the point? Mistreating others doesn't make the world a safer place. It doesn't make it a more peaceful place. Growing up in a misogynistic society has consequences and is especially dangerous when you do not conform to the mass accepted ideology. So my story goes like this. I was really confused about gender when I was a child. I thought genitals were gross and weird, and I just wanted to be without gender. I had a picture in my mind about this alien creature with no hair or holes or genitals, and that looked more logical to me. And I was offended when I discovered that I was female, because being female in this society meant that you were considered to be lesser than men, and that just didn't seem fair. But I believed it because that's what I was taught. That was the world I grew up in. So when I started developing breasts, I would wrap them up tight to my body. I wore baggy clothes. This was also in part because I was trying to protect myself from men, hoping they wouldn't realize I was female, because even as a child, I was sexually harassed. My friends were sexually harassed. I don't know if I ever met a woman who hasn't been sexually harassed or assaulted. This society shits out really shitty men. Like, even some of the guys that I've dated have been assaulted sexually by men. Most men are so toxic and privileged that they think that they're entitled to other people's bodies. And that ideology really needs to change for the better. And of course, the consequences of that ideology is violence towards women and anyone who doesn't subscribe to that model of thinking. Toxic misogyny has been unchecked for ages, and no one is safe until we start making safe spaces and educating the next generations on how to contribute to those safe spaces. Okay, so identity. What makes you, you? Do you decide who you are, or do other people decide who you are? If I listen to goth music, if I dress goth, if I go to goth events, and I identify as goth, does that make me goth? Do I decide that for myself, or does somebody else? If I dress in black without any other context, does that make me goth? What about if somebody else calls me goth? So mislabeling and having people put words in our mouths is something that the alternative community has historically suffered from. This is something that the trans community is dealing with from the transphobic population. Let trans people speak for themselves and be their authentic self. Check the bio for links to trans voices and listen to their perspective. I don't believe that people define who you are. Your actions define who you are, and people will interpret it based on their own individual experience. But when transphobic people make the world less safe for others who don't want to roleplay gender roles that don't define them, that makes transphobic people untrustworthy and unsafe to be around, because it shows that they are selective on who gets respect and who doesn't. They want respect, but they don't want to respect others. They want to feel safe, but they don't want others to feel safe. So does gender matter? Gender matters when it comes to personal identity and personal safety, because ultimately, if you stand for the safety of all humans, you are not being selective on which humans get to be treated like humans. If you are a respectful person, it will show in your actions. When you address people by the names and pronouns that they give you, you are sending the message that you would like others to respect your name and pronouns. Okay, drag story hour. From my understanding, no one is forcing children to attend drag story hour. It is voluntary participation. Parents are choosing to culture their children and expose them to opportunities where they can learn to accept others regardless of looks or gender, and learn not to be afraid of expressing and exploring themselves. I personally would have loved that as a child because I did not get enough culturing. But on the other hand, other children are being taught by their parents to be racist, sexist, violent bullies that have no respect for human life. They judge others on their appearance. They see others as being lesser than them because they do not conform to their beliefs and ideologies. That's child abuse. And that's making future offenders, future criminals, future sexual abusers. I would love to see more parents being held accountable for how their children turn out. Transphobic people truly believe that they are protecting children by making less safe spaces for them to explore themselves and be accepted for who they are. What transphobic people are actually doing is preventing the opportunity for children to feel safe about being transgendered by teaching them that the consequences of going against the status quo will never be in their benefit, because they will face violence and prejudice and hate from their community, that they will never be treated as equal because there are people out there that hate them so much that they are willing to hurt them because of who they are. We must help transphobic people understand that their actions are making the world less safe for others, for children. And you might notice that this is the same BS that people tried to pull during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. During that time, my conservative, homophobic mother argued that it was making the world a more safe place for gays by allowing heterosexual workers to talk about their relationships, but homosexuals weren't allowed the same privilege. Homophobes thought they were somehow making the world safer for homosexual workers by making sure that they stay in the closet, so that the violent homophobes don't find them and assault them. So in that context, you can't have equality, but you can have safety if you stay in the closet. Out of sight, out of mind. Yet, if the tables were turned, you know heterosexual workers would be on the front lines demanding justice and equality. It's the same thing with the transphobic community. They want trans people to disappear, but they don't understand that trans people have always been in society. They just want to feel safe. Is that so much to ask? Why is it so painful for the privileged to share privilege? How come some people are allowed to feel safe and others are not? That doesn't seem right to me. And what's up with some LGBTQ plus community members backing up transphobia? Some are literally betraying their community by supporting the oppression of children, who, like them, may have also gone through bullying, abuse, living in fear, thoughts of suicide. So again, how do you think that you're going to be protecting children by making less safe spaces for them? Dear trans youth and trans family, I am so sorry that you have to deal with a society that wants you to disappear. I want you to know that you have allies, and we will continue to stand up for you to have safe spaces, to express and explore your authentic self. You are not alone, because united we stand. Your existence demands justice for those who are no longer with us, because the violence of a transphobic society was too much to bear. Your existence is a symbol of hope and strength that will build a more peaceful world, that embodies equality and compassion, and that provides safe spaces for future generations. As the world transitions to a higher level of consciousness, we must choose to leave the old, outdated, violent belief systems in the past and embody the energies of peace and equality. Thank you to everyone for holding those safe spaces for others. Thank you for standing against oppression and embodying equality, peace, and justice. Power to the peaceful. Live long and prosper.